Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, take me home.
don't hold me back, you just hold on. I had it rough, I had to move for a while. Locked down the house and chained up with the now. I'm coming home and everyone is invited, singing, don't bring that trouble with you, don't bring that trouble with you.
Big time playing some big time games, and that's what we did, baby. Yes, sir.
I found a way around you, don't take me higher. Last time the way I loved you, just wind up tired. I'm letting what I need to carry you through it. Stay back but get on track, cause I can't have you ruined. I said hold on but don't hold me back. Hold on but don't hold me back. Hold on but don't hold me back. I said hold on. I had it rough, I had to move for a while. Locked down the house and chained it up with a nail. I'm coming home and everyone is invited, singing.
Hello and welcome to the Backyard PA Football Podcast. I'm Nathan Grella along with,
I'm Jeremiah Miller.
and we got a special announcement for you guys regarding Jeremiah Miller. Nick Haushalter, a longtime co-host, friend of mine, been on the podcast for a couple years, started in State College. He's decided he's going to take a little bit of a break from the podcast. He's still going to go to games with us, still going to be a part of the network. But as far as a regular host on the podcast, he's going to be stepping down from that position. So we decided to fill that role with Jeremiah, who is going to step in as the new co-host along with me. I'm definitely excited. I think this is going to be a great thing for the podcast. Jeremiah, just describe, I know it's not that big of a accomplishment, but I'm definitely excited to have you on.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be the new co-host. It's happy. I enjoy every time I get to come on with you guys. When you guys invite me, I think I've been on 3 or 4 times now, and enjoy every time. So, and I get to look forward to this every week, and we're getting closer and closer to high school football season. So I'm super excited about this, and I really can't wait for the season.
Yeah, practices are starting to ramp up here, and you definitely had your share of those as a player for West Green. So your knowledge of the area, it's extensive, and we're definitely excited, to have you on full time here along with me. Let's get started, though. I mentioned it just then. Practices have started up, starting a little bit of a discussion on COVID-19. We talked twice in the last couple months, interviewing you about, your opinions on practices during COVID-19. Do you feel more positively now after we talked, those 2 times, cases are starting to ramp up around the nation?
I'm going to be honest with you, Nathan. I'm kind of in the same boat as I was when we last talked. Everything looked good. The PIAA came out not too long ago and said, they plan on still having a season. So, that can only be a positive. Things that worry me, the numbers have gone up, especially in the Western Pennsylvania area where we plan to cover, not just the whole state has been affected, but in Western PA's numbers have went up a lot in the last month or two. Another thing that has me worried, of course, the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference canceled their fall sports, postponed their fall sports until January 2021. Of course, for our viewers, some of the local teams in the PSAC, like California, University of Pennsylvania, Slippery Rock, Edinburgh, and what have you. So teams pretty close to home, especially in this area, and even out towards you guys, State College, Lock Haven will go into effect with that too. So, and then word I hear from other states around the country, like the big one, you could even say the Holy Grail of high school football right now, California, their athletic association announced just yesterday, I believe it was, that they're postponing the fall sports season till the spring, actually, of 2021. So, there's some positives, like I said, like the PIAA coming out and saying that they, looking to still have a fall sports season. But I'm kind of just in the same boat right now. I'm still confident that there's going to be a season, but it makes you wonder.
Yeah, definitely. I know seeing, Virginia High School is going with an alternate method. I'm not sure if they completely canceled their season, but I think they're reconsidering having it. And that's, a state very close to us. I think Maryland's doing the same thing. Seeing the PIAA come out, though, and it seems like the PIAA has been very bullish on having a season. They want to continue normally. I don't know if that's completely a smart idea, but seeing them, proceed with caution, I think is a positive thing. August 5th, PIAA has another meeting, though. I know last week they had a meeting and there was a lot of negativity surrounding that, and they came out with that statement. It'll be interesting to see. It looks like that's the date where we're going to find out whether it's a green light or a red light, so to speak. Hopefully cases start to simmer down a little bit in the state. I know deaths have basically stayed around the same level, but I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there. What is your, overall prediction of what's going to happen? Are we going to start to see a more momentum for the spring plan, or are we going to see, a push for the fall here?
That's a tough question. I know in this area, especially where I went to high school, if the fall sports season would be moved in the spring, that'd be pretty difficult. Like, I know as far as sports that bring high schools the most income, it's obviously football. At every school, no matter how good or bad a team might be per season. But I know in this area, the spring sports season is very big. I know softball in this area, of course, when I was in high school, West Green, our softball team won 2 state titles and 4 district titles. So especially at my high school, just speaking from experience. But knowing in this area, softball is pretty big. So I find that hard for the PIAA to move it in the spring season, and I know how springs are in Western Pennsylvania, especially in Western Pennsylvania. Just the weather. Not that the fall isn't any harder, but I know the rain we get. Not that rain will stop a football game, but just the planning around that and everything will make it difficult with that. But it just makes you wonder. Well, then there will be the argument. Well, why are we going to let the fall sports happen in the spring, and then we're going to push the winter and spring sports back, or are we just not going to have them? So then there's that argument of the side. And then again, is it fair? What if there's a spring sport athlete that doesn't play a fall sport? Let's say they're just they only play baseball year round. Well, then what if they don't get to have a baseball season because they move the fall sports to the spring? So that's just some examples. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I really think that the PIAA will stick with the fall sports season being in the fall, that is. I would be really shocked if they moved it to the spring. I'll be honest with you, 1 or 2 things will probably happen. We'll either have fall sports this fall, or there won't be fall sports till fall 2021. So
I certainly hope you're right. In moving now more into the fall, this is, the grand poobah of Backyard PA football episodes. These next couple episodes, you read the title if you're listening. This is going to be our preview for the Tri-County South Conference, a conference that you played in, and then that you got to be able to watch, as a spectator for the first time in 4 years last year. Just a little bit of review for those that weren't paying attention as closely as we were last year. West Green kind of ran away with the whole thing. Ben Jackson, a dynamite offense. Brian Hansen at the helm at the offensive coordinator spot. And that defense was amazing as well. They kind of destroyed everyone they played against in conference-wise, and they kind of ran away with it. California was on their heels a little bit, had a tough out-of-conference schedule, finished second, went to the playoffs, lost in the first round. Chargers Houston was the best of the rest. They won 7 games, and then they moved up to 2A. And the rest was kind of a hodgepodge of teams, jockeying for position. So what were your overall opinions, of last season?
Especially being an alumni of West Green, I can honestly say I did not expect the season they would have. Not saying that, I thought after my class left that the success would go down. I just didn't expect, a 10-2 season. They ran the table in the Tri-County South for sure, which I thought they would. We got to share the section championship my senior year, and I knew California would be a tough game again. But for them to absolutely go out and shut down California and hold them scoreless. And I kept stats that game. West Green only gave up 46 total yards of offense, and that just absolutely blew my mind, especially, with this past success or lack of success that we had against California. When I was there in high school, I didn't lost California 4 straight years. Didn't score a single point against California until my senior year, and we still lost that game 24-14. But as far as that goes, just still, can't believe West Green ran away with it. And of course, Ben Jackson had a season for the ages and a career for the ages, if that mattered. Especially coming back from back-to-back seasons, breaking both ankles to, going out of senior year and becoming the first Whitfield player in history to rush for 3,000 yards. California, again, right there on the cusp of winning their a share of their 3rd straight conference championship. Moving Cochise Ryan to quarterback. They're kind of doing the same thing this year, moving DeMonte Stafford there. That's going to be interesting to see. Cochise wasn't really known for his arm strength. It'll be interesting to see how DeMonte's is, so that's going to be interesting this year. And then Char Houston, surprised a lot of people last year. I was one of the people who I actually wasn't surprised. I actually thought Char Houston would be really good. I remember when I played them my senior year, they were really young, a lot of freshmen and sophomores on that team. Of course, they became sophomores and juniors. That helps. And I told people, and I think I even told you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I said the only thing that's going to hurt Char Houston is if they get bumped up to AA. Char Houston got bumped up to AA. So, we'll see how they do. We'll see. Of course, their last 2 seasons in AA. They're just their last year. Their second, just to show their second to last year in AA. They were runner-ups to Wash High in the conference. The next year they were in AA, which was their last time. They went 0-9. So that just shows you Char Houston and AA. They'll either be, they'll be really good, maybe make the scratch in the playoffs and, maybe make a run for the conference championship or, have a bad season. So I wish them the best. I think if they were still in, I honestly think if they were in single A still in Tri-County South, I think I would make them the favorite. Honestly, I think that would be a fair assumption. They returned the most out of everyone, really, from last year. I mean, even with Carmichael's coming down to Tri-County South. Bentworth had a disappointing season. Even they'll tell you that. We had Owen Patricic and Trent Kavanaugh on, and they've even admitted that. I really look for them to have a better year with them being the 1-2 punch. We'll talk about them later in the show. And then like we said all along, we think this year's the most open Tri-County South's been in a while. There's some really big questions we don't know yet. I think Jefferson returns a lot. They have Jonathan Wolf back, so that's a big thing. And then we'll just see, Avella didn't have a great season at all last year. Avella's bringing back, I think, the most returning starters in the conference.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so maybe not the most talent-wise, but definitely an experience. Avella's up there in the conference, and then Mapletown's young as well still. So from 2019, I think every team's going to improve this year, honestly. Maybe not as far as record goes. Like, I don't look for a team to run the table like West Green and have a 10-2 season per se. Like, I don't look at the Tri-County South this year, and there's not one team I look at and go, well, that team probably has a chance to play at Heinz Field around Thanksgiving. But I think there's some teams that could make a run in the playoffs and maybe have a little Cinderella run. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this year. I think for us.
Yeah, the team you mentioned just briefly there was Carmichael's moving down from 2A, and they certainly had a nice season up in 2A. I think they beat Brownsville. I think they beat Beth Center as well. So, that's two quality 2A wins for Carmichael's, and they return a lot on offense and defense. But we'll talk about that in a couple minutes here. Let's start off, we're going alphabetically through the Tri-County South. Let's start out with Avella. They went 1-9 last year, 0-7 in conference. That one win came against Bishop Canevin. I'm sure you'll correct me on that one. But yeah, not the best season for Avella, but they do return, 9 on offense, 10 on defense. Their quarterback's back, their main runner's back. They got a couple weapons in the receiving, but I think, when it comes down to it, they lack a lot of, size and weight, height in the trenches. Do they have enough experience or talent coming back, at skill positions to make up for that this year?
That's hard to say because, football games are won in the trenches. They really are. I know, all the skill players get the recognition and the linemen don't. I know that from experience. But I really find it hard for Avella. Like you said, they lack in size. I really think it's going to be another tough season for Avella. The one thing they got going, like I just mentioned, though, they got a lot of experience back. And that experience isn't going to hurt them unless those kids would not come back out for this season. But the experience they had last year, I know it was a rough season, but that's only going to help them for this season and then the next couple seasons.
Yeah, and they certainly, out of conference, they play Fort Cherry. So that's a game that they should be competitive in. They play Mapletown twice, and they were competitive in both of those games last year. So if they're somehow able to flip the switch and get those 3 wins, I think you can come away, if you're an Eagles fan, and look at this season as a positive building block for future seasons. Their most intriguing game, I think, is still going to be Avella Mapletown, one of those 2 games. They play week 0 as an out-of-conference game, and then later in the season as a conference game on October 4th. Again, I mentioned Fort Cherry. Is there another game on the schedule that you look at and think Avella might have a chance in?
Like you said, the 2 Mapletown games, the one will really set the week 0 game will really, set the momentum for each one of those teams. The most important of those games, as we all know, is the second one because that's the one that counts the most, the conference game. Looking at Avella's schedule, I don't know what Fort Cherry brings back. I know they had a rough year as well last year. So like you said, I see them competitive in that game. I think Avella, I don't know what Monessen going to bring. Not just new coach. They didn't really have many kids at the end of last season. Hopefully they can bring a lot of kids out. But I'm not sure if that game's at Monessen or at Avella. I'm not sure. I'm sure Nathan knows. But I would say as far as another game goes, I could see that Monessen-Avella game being a close one.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about Monessen in a little bit, but Monessen on defense is certainly a tough scratch for any team. But offensively for Monessen, they're bringing in a new coach and a new system. That could be a game where if Monessen is kind of looking ahead to whoever they play next, Avella could maybe keep that competitive. So I like where your head's at for them. But yeah, I think Avella is just not in the conversation right now for winning this conference or even making the playoffs. So it's definitely a long rebuild for them that they're kind of in the middle of. Let's move on to the next team here, Bentworth Bearcats. They went 2-8 last year, 2-5 in the conference. If you're looking at this conference, it's basically a losing record for anyone below the top 3. And Bentworth was no different. I think West Green put an 80 burger on them, I think, during the year. So they had a couple tough games. Defensively it was a struggle for them, but offensively, Trent Kavanaugh, Owen Petrizek, Sean Dziak at quarterback threw for a ton of yards early in the year, and he's basically the only guy they're going to be replacing. 7 back on offense, 8 back on defense. You mentioned Kavanaugh and Petrizek. They got Caleb Peternell back in the receiving core, and then a heap back in the trenches, which is a an area that they definitely lacked last year. So having continuity back is going to help them. Will having all of that experience back kind of lead to an improved defense next year?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing as Avella. Like I said, just with Avella, the experience isn't going to hurt them. It can only help them. I know when we talked with Trent and Owen earlier in the summer, they had mentioned the West Green game. Of course, West Green, I believe they dropped, I believe it was 82 points on them early in the season. I was at that game. And just not only the defense, but of course, West Green had 2 defensive touchdowns and a special teams touchdown. So just all around, really not the best game if you're a Benworth Bearcat. But they even mentioned when they were talking with us, they have that game marked down. They remember that game from last year. They definitely have that one circled on their calendar. So that's good to hear from them. That if they can get that around, I think that's only going to help them. We had mentioned before if Kavanaugh and Patricic were the best 1-2 punch in the Tri-County South. A little too early to tell right now for me who's the best 1-2 punch right now, but I would definitely have them right up there with anyone. But I definitely think the defense will be much improved. And I know we know who we feel our top 3 are, Nathan, as far as who's going into this year. But I think Benworth could possibly scratch their way in to the top 3 and maybe make the playoffs if they have a great enough year. I think another thing is, Kavanaugh is one of their biggest guys on the team. Another, how many guys they get out for the trenches as offensive line. And, like I said, it's one of the trenches. Same thing we just talked with Avella. So that's going to be interesting to see there, their offensive line for Benworth. But look for Benworth to have a much improved year. I'm not saying playoffs just yet. I think they can scratch their way in, like I just said, but a much improved season for Benworth.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a lot to go right for them to. I mean, they're going to have to basically make up a lot of skill in the trenches, I think.
Right, and they're going to have to upset someone along the line. So, it's going to be
I mean, there's a definite top 3 in this conference where it's West Green, Cal, and Carmichael's, and I think Jefferson, Morgan, and Benworth are those next 2 that you're not going to count out right now as far as the rankings go. You're not going to count them out for playoffs, but there's definitely deficiencies in their games that they've got to make up, and if they make those up, then there's no reason that they can't make the playoffs. And Benworth's one of those teams, but they're replacing the quarterback, and they don't really have a logical replacement in the roster right now. And Sean Zihak made up so much of their offense earlier in that year. How will losing him just impact them going into next year?
Well, it's definitely not going to be it's definitely going to hurt them, when you lose a starting quarterback and you don't really have anyone that sticks out right now, as the predecessor. When we talked, I mentioned when we talked to Owen and Trent back earlier this year, we asked them, who's going to be the new man under center. And both of them even said, I believe they threw out a couple names, as far as the QB battle. So that'll be interesting to see. It's kind of, not to brag on West Green, but kind of makes you, like Hanson, obviously Gavin Scott was the quarterback, start of the year, majority of the year last year. Then they throw in Orndorff late in the season. Of course, Orndorff's going to be the quarterback for the future in the next 2 years, but then you have Scott, who's been a starter for 2.5 years, and you're just going to put him, at wide receiver. But it looks like as of right now, it's going to work out for Hanson, at least going forward. So, but you give credit to him right there for that. But as far as back to Benworth goes, Benworth's going to be a running team this year. It looks like with Kavanaugh. Of course, they'll have Patricic out. So I look for Patricic to get a lot of carries this year, though, even with them being labeled a wide receiver. But yeah, it's definitely going to hurt replacing him. But just knowing from experience, from my high school, we'd thrown kids in a quarterback that didn't have a lot of quarterback experience, and it ended up working out for us. So, don't expect it to be very hard for Benworth to find their replacement.
Yeah, and looking at their schedule, I think definitely the most intriguing game and a team that we've been talking about this whole podcast is home against West Green on October 9th. You know, I'm sure it didn't help West Green putting 80 points on them last year. That game is going to be extremely important. It's probably going to be homecoming for them. If the virus wraps up like we hope it will, they'll probably have fans in the stands for that game. That's going to be that's going to be a statement game for that program for JJ Knapp entering, his first couple years of that program. So that's going to be super for them. And then, transitioning now into another team that is kind of a mystery to us is going to be California. Coming back with 6 on offense, 5 on defense, but it still feels like, they only have really one offensive lineman coming back in Eric Edmondson, and the rest is kind of a complete mystery to us. They replaced basically 6 guys, or 6 guys need to be replaced, coming back in the trenches. Seth Rarisha on defense is huge for them. He might be the best defensive player in the conference. Is having to replace all of that, hard raw strength in the trenches, is that going to hurt them, heading into this year, especially losing, a lot of practice time with COVID?
Yeah, that's the big question for California this year. We know they got the athletes. Damani Stafford coming back, moving him to quarterback. That's another big question we'll get to. That's going to be intriguing to see. It worked out pretty well for them last year, doing the same thing with Coach Heath Ryan. It worked out pretty well for them last year. So it'll be interesting to see how Damani does under center. And then they got Zuzak back as well as Joe Savage and all that. But as we said with Avella and Bentworth with the offensive line, the games are won in the trenches. You can have all the athletes in the world, but someone's going to block for you and open those holes up. So that's going to be the big thing for California, and that's probably going to be California's kryptonite this year. That's their offensive line is really what's going to make or break California this year.
Yeah, if there's one coach though that I think in this conference that could work around deficiencies, it's going to be Ed Woods, right? And having Damani Stafford and Jaden Zuzak back, probably, 2 of the most dynamic players in the conference. He's going to use that to his advantage, having Nathan O'Savage back, having Matt Trunzo back, having a lot of those athletes, Mason Sholok, having those guys he can kind of play with in his offensive scheme is going to help. But yeah, defensively, I think they look really strong in the back end, and that's not anything new for California. But yeah, Damani Stafford, QB1 now. How is that going to look in their offense?
I mean, time will tell, really. I imagine that they'll have the same sort of offense as they did with Coach Heath Ryan last year. Coach Heath was a little, I would say, is a little faster than Damani. But Damani's definitely more, I would say, on the side of more powerful and probably stronger than Coach Heath for the most part. So, it just depends on Damani's arm strength too. Damani, they're going to throw a lot with Damani, or, they're going to have kind of like an option kind of deal, kind of how they have in the past. So time will really tell with that. I think that's one of the more intriguing things this year with as far as the Tri-County South goes is how Cal will do with Damani Stafford at quarterback. I mean, we know how successful Damani has been for the most part in his young career so far at running back. What they have planned for him at quarterback, and really it intrigues me. It's probably my number one most intriguing thing because I think Damani is arguably one of the best athletes in the Tri-County South, and for the most part, who we cover. I know we picked up a lot of talented teams this year, so he might drop on the list there, but he's definitely one of the more talented athletes in the Tri-County South, no questions about it. So I'm really excited to see what he can do at quarterback for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, Jaden Zuzak got injured early in the year last year and was out for the remainder. He's really the fastest and most versatile athlete they have at running back, and they don't have a lot besides that. I know they have a lot of, they have a lot of names that have experience, but they're more receiver. They don't play the the downhill runner position as well as Zuzak does and Stafford did last year. If Zuzak experiences another one of those injuries, I know California has two talented freshman quarterbacks coming in. Is there a chance that we might see Stafford maybe even move back to running back if that happens?
Well, I mean, I don't wish for injury on anyone, but at least Cal knows that if Zuzak does go down and that change needs to be made, I mean, they know they have a top-notch running back and Damani. So, I mean, that's nice. We hope that Zuzak can stay healthy this year, obviously, as
Definitely.
tremendous talent as he is. But that's an interesting point you brought up. But definitely I think that change would be an easy decision for Ed Woods if that were to happen. The success Damani has had at tailback. But like I said, I'm really interested to see how he does at quarterback this year. It's going to be a real big thing. And then his line's going to have to help him. That's, like I said, the make or break for Cal's the offensive line. And, is that going to be a big thing, a new quarterback? He's definitely an athlete. There's no question about that. But, if he doesn't get in the blocks, he can't show what he has to offer. So it's back to the offensive line for Cal, really.
Where do you think, they stack up in the rankings? They're kind of an enigma in that they're replacing so much in the trenches, and Carmichael's is replacing, a lot of. Carmichael's is getting a lot of depth back in the trenches, but as far as versatility wise, California is 3 steps ahead of where Carmichael's is. Where do you see them, ranking at the end of it?
Well, the good news for Cal is we know we're talking about them not returning a lot on the offensive line. The good news for Cal is a lot of teams, other than Avella, really aren't returning much. I mean, as a whole, Bentworth is a little bit too, but so that's the good thing Cal has going for him. A lot of teams, like we said, this year's pretty open, so a lot of teams are really trying to prove who they are this year. We have an idea of who we feel is going to be the favorites, and I know you do as well. But for me, I think Cal is one of those favorites, even though we talked about the offensive line. But as of right now, I think they have the athletes to help out, and I look for Cal to be right in the running for the Tri-County South Championship this fall.
Yeah, one game that's probably going to decide that is their game on October 16th against Carmichael's, and that's a key road game for them. That's a matchup I'm definitely looking forward to. That's like Bailey Jones against, this talented linebacking core and Seth Raricha at Cal is going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see Damani Stafford facing a talented defensive line that Carmichael's has. So, and now we'll move into Carmichael's, our next team we're covering. They played a 2A schedule last year and went 4-5, and that is impressive for them. I think coming 2 years out of moving from 1A to 2A, that's definitely an improvement for them. Seeing Kevin Kelly working that offense last year was impressive as well against some pretty mediocre teams in 2A. They had their way with Brownsville, Beth Center, Frazier. They almost beat. And this year they're getting Bailey Jones back. They're getting Hunter Voigthover back. They're getting a lot of depth pieces back. They only returned 2 starters in the trenches, but they have a lot of experience that played up last year. So looking at all that returning experience, is Carmichael's kind of the true favorite right now to win this conference?
I don't think there's a true favorite at all in the Tri-County South. A lot of questions, for Carmichael's. You said they only bring back 2 starters on the offensive line. But I will say, out of all the teams, Carmichael's historically always has a solid offensive line. So I don't expect them to have any problems on the offensive line. Because just historically, Carmichael's has always had a very solid offensive line. But the big thing for them is the replacement for Kevin Kelly. Arguably, you could say Kevin was one of the best quarterbacks in the area. If not the best, just stuff didn't go his way. You put Kevin Kelly on any other team, Kevin Kelly might lead that team to, make a run for the Whitfield Championship. I really think Kevin Kelly was that good of a quarterback, and Kevin's going to Cal U now to play football. Unfortunately, Cal U won't be having football this fall, but that's going to be the big thing for Carmichael's. But I think Carmichael's is one of my three favorites. They're not the true favorite, but they're one of my three right now that I feel has a chance to win the conference.
Yeah, and the replacement for Kevin Kelly is going to be Trenton Carter, who's going to be a rising senior. He's gotten snaps, but he hasn't gotten, that full exposure to playing at the 1A varsity level. But I know that's somebody that they've been really excited for a long time. And if Kevin Kelly wasn't as good as he was, I think Trenton Carter would have gotten, that more playing time, more exposure, might have even been the starter last year. So I know that's someone they're very excited about, and he certainly got the supporting cast around him. Trenton, we mentioned Trenton Carter, but Bailey Jones, Hunter Voidover, having a lot of talented backs behind him is going to be important for them. And then, kind of an unexpected thing for them heading from 2A to 1A, but also losing their head coach, Ryan Kroll, unexpectedly resigned from the position, but they're going to have continuity back, promoting the defensive coordinator from last year, Ron Gallagher, to the position. How important is it to have that continuity on the defensive side of the ball? Something that they kind of excelled at the 2A level last year was defense. So, how important is that for them?
Yeah, it's very important, not only on defense, but I would just say as the whole team, to have that familiarity with Coach Gallagher just as a whole. I think that's going to be huge. Going to have I assume the same kind of system. Players, he knows the players well. The players know Coach Gallagher well. Just what he brings on offense, that'll be interesting to see. I assume it will be the same kind of system as we expect from Carmichael's. Carmichael's isn't going to really trick you. They're just going to try to run you over, So I really expect that. It's going to be good for Carmichael's, though. I think he was the right man for the job. I know how good his defenses were when I played. So I think that's a huge thing for Carmichael's, having that familiarity with Ron Gallagher back. So that's huge.
Yeah, and taking a look at their schedule now, that continuity is certainly going to help because it doesn't get easy off the gate. Playing a 3A team from last year on the road at Waynesburg Central. This was a game that I thought initially was going to be at John F. Wiley Stadium, but I don't think that's going to end up happening now with no crowd and everything. It's probably going to be at Waynesburg Central, but still, that's a tough matchup for them. A team that, kind of underachieved at the 3A level, but heading down to 2A, now playing a 1A team. Waynesburg is going to be out biting for something, right? How important for Carmichael's is that opening game?
That's definitely a huge game for Carmichael's. It'll definitely show what they have to offer this season, not just in single A, but just as the season as a whole. That's kind of a big game for Waynesburg, too. We'll get more into that, I'm sure, in the next coming weeks when we preview the Interstate Conference. But definitely big for Carmichael's to prove what they have early on against a team in Waynesburg, which I know they get a bad rap, but they played in arguably the toughest conference in the state of Pennsylvania, in my eyes, at that AAA conference. I mean, if you look, the last four conference champions out of that conference have been in the state championship game. Three of them have won it in Aliquippa, Quaker Valley, and Beaver Falls. Central Valley came up short this year. So, I mean, Waynesburg was in that conference the last 2 years and was at the bottom of that. So, I mean, they get a bad rap. I think Waynesburg's going to really surprise some people at the interstate level. So if Carmichael's can end up going to John F. Wiley, probably not going to be at John F. Wiley. If they can go to Waynesburg Central and squeak that one out, that'll really set the tone. And maybe early on say, hey, for me at least, I really think high of Waynesburg this year. I think that Carmichael's, if they can go do that, I really think Carmichael's has a chance to maybe not run away the way West Green did last year, but, kind of, set the tone.
I mean, whoever wins that game is going to tell us a lot about what kind of team they are. Even the score will, because these are kind of, I mean, Waynesburg, we have no idea what to expect from them heading into this year. In my opinion, they lose so much from last year, and they were even such an enigma. Like, they were playing way out of their shoes in that conference last year. We have no idea what to expect from them, and then Carmichael's moving down. Like, comparatively to other 1A teams, we don't have really a good idea of what they're going to bring to the table. So that game is going to tell us loads about each team. But a team we know a lot about coming back is Jefferson Morgan. They're a team that were able to put a lot of points on the board last year, but lackluster defensively. And then from that offense, they got 8 coming back, including quarterback Cole Jones. Jonathan Wolf is coming back at running back. They're losing Liam Ankrum, who is not going to be playing football this year. They got the receivers back, tight end, 3 offensive linemen. So offense is going to be fully locked and loaded for the Rockets. Is this the year that Jefferson Morgan is going to be able to kind of turn the tide and become really a true offensively balanced team for them?
No, I think it's still, it's like we said, I think that we said the 3 who we feel. We haven't mentioned the last one yet. I'm pretty sure the viewers can guess who the next one's going to be. But they're right there with Bentworth. Like I said, I think I could see Bentworth scratching into the top 3 and maybe make the playoffs. I think Jefferson's right there too. I think Jefferson's real year is going to be the next 2 years, not this year, but 2021 and 2022. I really think those are going to be Jefferson's years. As far as maybe being a contender to win the Tri-County South. But this year's definitely going to be big for a transition year into next year. If they do scratch in and make the playoffs, next year, I think expectations at Jefferson Morgan should be to win the Tri-County South and win a couple playoff games in the WPIAL. Having Jonathan Wolf back is going to be huge. Losing Ankrum is going to be, it's going to hurt them. That's unfortunate. He won't be able to play this year. But to have Wolf back in the backfield, for him to be the workhorse, maybe look for Wolf to get 25 to 30 carries. Hopefully he comes into camp in shape. I know it's going to be hard for a lot of people, especially this year more than others because of quarantine and everything. It's been hard to get out and do stuff and get together and go to gyms and everything. So, it just depends. Hopefully Wolf doesn't come out to camp and he's, as big as an offensive lineman. Not that he's big as in general now, but hopefully he's not. Hopefully we see him in the backfield for Jeff Morgan and not on the offensive line. And definitely having Cole back at quarterback, that's going to be big for Jeff Morgan too. So, like I said, don't think this is the year. I think they might scratch their way in. They got to upset one of the top 3 teams on the way if they want to do that. But I think this year will definitely help transition for the next 2 years, where I think Jefferson will be one of the teams to beat.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to see this team because, despite having Jonathan Wolf back as a senior and him being such a huge part of this offense, they're still a relatively pretty young team. And it stinks that, Liam Ankrum is not going to be playing for the Rockets because, he was kind of going to be the next role. Next year was supposed to be Jefferson Morgan's, kind of like we were supposed to see them kind of take the next step this year and then, have Liam Ankrum, because Jonathan Wolf is a senior, and either Cole Jones is going to improve drastically as a sophomore this year, and he's going to take the step as being, the core of that offense, and next year is going to be his time to shine, but not having Liam Ankrum next year is definitely going to hurt. So if the Rockets were ever going to make, a challenge for, the playoffs, it would have to be this year, or else they're going to have to find that next running back in their system this year to, supplant into next year. But, defensively, it was definitely a struggle for them last year. Bentworth, had their way with them. I think that was like a 50-point game for each team or something last year.
Yeah, I believe both teams definitely had more than 40 points. I know.
Yeah. It was definitely a struggle for the Rockets defensively, and when you look at their defense, I think each of their defensive returners' main position is still on offense. So it's definitely not a priority as far as Coach Aaron Georgi goes. But, that's got to be a priority for them heading into this year. Is that defense going to step up and help them compete with a lot of the teams on their schedule?
Well, they're going to have to. I mean, if they want to keep with it, California's going to have an explosive offense. I feel even with the offensive line questions, West Green, I know they don't return their backfield, but I know West Green's going to have something new for everyone. They're going to really going to see Coach Hanson's offense for real this year. He just kind of came in and saw what he had, and I mean to be fair, when you have a talent like Colin Walker and Ben Jackson in the backfield, I would kind of just kind of let them do their thing, but that's going to be hard for them as well. And I know Carmichael's always has that aggressive run first offense. So Jefferson's defense is going to have to step up this year. I mean, they're going to have to win. We talked about them maybe scratching in and getting in. They have to upset one of the top three teams. But you got to beat Bentworth too. Right now we probably would rank Bentworth ahead of them as far as Bentworth would they ever have to return, and of course Bentworth beating them last year. So you got to get past Bentworth first before you can get it with the quote unquote heavyweights in the Tri-County South.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see Jefferson Morgan because I still think there's definitely talent there.
Just their biggest thing, not to interrupt you, Nate, is experience right now. They have experience. They're bringing back a lot of experience, but the experience that they have, is that going to compete well with the experience that other teams have right now?
Yeah, and their out of conference schedule, it's not easy either. They're gonna be playing a playoff team in Cornell at home week 3. That's going to be an important game for them if they're going to make a statement and say, hey, we're in this too. I think even competing in that game would say that. So that's going to be super important for them. And it's a home game too. So, I mean, that's a game they'll be looking forward to as well. Another team, in this conference that's kind of trying to create an identity now is going to be Mapletown. 2-8 last year, both of those wins coming against the same team. 1-6 in conference. It's going to be interesting for George Message. I know he's been there for a long time. Max Venata heading in his junior year, and he's kind of going to be the centerpiece of that offense. He's had 2 years to work in it, and they've had a big runner last year. I think his name was Zach Green. I'm not completely sure. It was Zach something. But he's gone. So it's Max Venata's offense. Is that continuity going to help them maybe translate some of these losses into wins? I know they don't have a ton coming back besides him. Nathan Courtwright may be in the backfield, but that's it. I mean, I think it's going to be another basement season for them, but I give it to you to convince me otherwise.
I'm not going to do any convincing here for Mapletown. I look for them to be competitive in both games against Avella. I look for them to be competitive against Monessen, but other than that, I think it's another bad year for Mapletown. But I knew I remember when I was younger in Little League, like A team was the highest classification of Mapletown. When they were on that B team, Mapletown was the team to beat. They were the champions in that league. So if those kids stuck together, I don't know if they did, but if those kids stuck together, this year could be a transition year, like I said, for Jefferson, and the next 2 years, the Maples could, they could make a run for the playoffs like they did a few years ago when they had Dylan Rush and the Hine brothers.
Yeah, I don't really see this being I mean, they got 6 starters coming back on both offense and defense, so that's certainly that's more positive than negative at least. But you're losing basically the identity of your offense, and Zach, whatever his last name was.
They only. I mean, I remember when they had Dylan Rush, he was their whole offense, and that when he graduated when I was a junior, I mean that hurt them the next year because they had to reinvent themselves pretty much, and they went 0-9 or 0-10, I believe. So. That hurt them. I hope the same thing doesn't happen this time, but I don't think it will. If they have the same quarterback back for his 3rd straight year, I think that's definitely that's definitely key. He's probably got the most experience at quarterback as far as varsity level time compared to anyone in the conference, really. So,
Yeah, and schedule-wise, I mean, they probably scheduled, the worst teams they could possibly play, try and get that record up. They play Northgate week 1. That'll be fun. And then, they later after that, I think they get Chargers Houston as well. So it'll be fun to see. All right, let's move into the next team on our list here. Sorry there for the break in the action. We had some technical difficulties. Monessen Greyhounds, new coach coming in for them. They went 4-6 last year, 4-3 in conference. So a positive record in conference, but still kind of a tough shake as far as the total record. They only bring back 3 starters on offense and 2 on defense. They finished the season last year with like 15 or 13 players, but they ended up getting like 27 in their first practice. I read an article about their new coach Shane Swope. He's definitely trying to implement some new culture there. Is that going to be effective? Monessen historically has been kind of an up and down school as far as success. Is that going to be able to work with a new coach coming in?
Time will tell with that one. This year, I think it's going to be a struggle for Monessen. They don't have a lot of experience coming back. Hopefully, the new coach can get a lot of kids to come out and help that program. There's definitely athletes in that school district, no question about it. It's just a matter of getting them out for the sport. But I think this year will be that really sets the tone for Monessen and Shane Swope. And I think in a couple years from now, we could see Monessen, like my senior year, they won a share of the conference championship, and nobody saw that coming. I know we did, and I know I could remember hearing the news that they played California week 1, and a lot of people around thought it was going to be us in California for the conference championship that year. And then Monessen comes out and California beats them 30-20 on opening weekend. So that was a big one right there. Maybe Monessen will have that in the next couple of years, one of those surprise seasons where they win 8 games and make the WPIAL playoffs. So I don't see that this year. I think Monessen will be around the bottom. I think just with experience coming back, I think they edge out Avella and Mapletown. I think those games are competitive, but I think they edge those teams out. And then from there, I think they can be competitive against Bellworth and Jefferson, but I don't see them in the win column there. So I see Monessen as the 6th team in the conference.
Yeah, they're an interesting team. I mean, the pieces they have coming back, Monessen's roster online with the coach change and everything, it's all kind of a mess right now, trying to find guys coming back, especially, with such a small team from last year. So it's hard to know what the talent level is from, some of those new players that are just showing up to practice this year. But, I think they have Steve Holmes III coming back, a running back, and he was one of their primary runners last year. So having him back is going to be important for them. And then Travion Thompson in the trenches was a big piece, a part of, their defensive success last year. And, their defense is almost always, pretty tough to go against. I know last year they were definitely tougher for some of even the better teams. I know Cal in the first half against Monessen, I think they kind of struggled out of the gate. I think West Green did the same. I'm not completely sure. I think Monessen was leading at half.
Monessen, I was going to say Monessen was leading West Green at half. They were on the verge of upsetting them, and then couldn't keep it together in the second half. But yeah, Monessen, especially playing at Monessen, that old stadium of Memorial Stadium for Monessen, that is definitely a hard place to go play and win at. Not many teams have gone in there and came out with a win, or a big blowout of a win. Even when Monessen's in their down years per se, that's a tough place to play, and Monessen does always have a great defense. So hopefully they'll continue that this year and carry that into the next couple of years.
Yeah, we mentioned the new culture change. They're going to be implementing a turnover chain. They have new locker rooms, new uniforms, new helmets, new everything. So it's definitely the beginning of a new era for the Greyhounds, and it's kind of exciting seeing all those guys interested in the program. I think the most intriguing game for them this year is going to be their home game against Bentworth. I think it's going to be interesting to see the athletes that Bentworth has superimposed with, the athletes that the Greyhounds are either bringing back or trying to put into their offense and defense. So I think that game will be interesting to see them play. All right, Jeremiah, you've been waiting all podcasts to preview your alma mater, the West Green Pioneers, and let's get into it. Coach Brian Hansen is returning for his sophomore year, and he certainly had a great freshman year with Ben Jackson at the helm, Colin Walker, Andrew Litton defensively. And people talk so much about Ben Jackson and that talented offense, but defensively, I think, was kind of where closer advisors saw them, shine. They're losing just about everybody defensively. Andrew Litton's gone. Brock Badillian's gone. Ben Jackson at linebacker. He's going to be playing linebacker at Army, so that tells you, how impressive he was there. Secondary-wise, though, Orndorff's back, Whippy's back, Gavin Scott isn't, but, are they going to continue to see that success on that side of the ball?
Yeah, they definitely got some big bodies to replace the guys. I mean, you never replace someone like Andrew Litton. Andrew just recently announced Andrew's playing football at Waysburg University now, kind of a late commit, but, kind of surprised Nate there, yeah.
I'm excited now.
Just within the last 2 weeks, I believe he committed to Waynesburg to play football. Yeah, like I said, kind of a late commit, but Andrew is playing football at Waynesburg. Yeah, hopefully he can get his knee and shoulder healed up, and I think he'll be a big addition there. Of course, like we said, Ben Jackson going to play. Look at Nathan over there. I knew something he didn't. But
he's got the connections. That's why.
Maybe the first time I was on the podcast and told everyone that he should play college ball, maybe that had something to do with it. But no, happy for Andrew. They got some big bodies. Replaced Brock. Maybe not the level of what's the word I want to use here. The level of production Brock had. It might not be separated. It might be separated into 2 or 3 guys, but they got some big bodies to replace Brock, and then Colin Walker and Jackson, they'll replace them very well. So I think the West Green defense, it's not going to be as dominant as last year, but it's definitely still going to be a stout team, and I think their defense is really what's going to be the big thing for them this year. I think their offense is going to surprise a lot of people. I think their offense will really be fine. I still think they have enough athletes to be fine there, but it's if they can put a defense together. And I think the secondary will help them a lot. They bring that experience, especially that secondary. I know they got kind of, I'm an alumni, so I can say it. They got torched in the playoffs against Stowe Rocks and Eric Williams. So, or Eric Wilson, pardon me. But so I think that, kind of they'll have that on the back of their minds, So I think that'll only help them this year. But yeah, I think the defense is still going to be pretty stout. I think they have enough athletes and big boys on the line to come back and help. But transitioning, I think the big thing, though, is for those guys with, like I said, the quarantine and everything coming into shape big time, which I've seen they're practicing. I know they got a bunch of kids out. I was talking to you before the show. I just hope they can come into shape because, they're West Green's going to expect a lot of guys to play both ways this year that necessarily haven't before. So that'll be a big thing, too, is longevity for not only a game but a season, then playing both ways. So.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a very interesting thing to see. I know, having Casey Miller and Corey Wise back, 2 guys that played both ways a lot last year, that's going to be important for them as well, just to get some of that experience in, that type of playing style. Brian Hansen, new offense. This is something I bring up to you a lot as far as West Green, is that heading into last season, Brian Hansen said a lot in his, introductory pressers and interviews. He said this on a PA Football News site that he really wanted to implement more of a passing offense, and he didn't get to do that with Ben Jackson because Ben Jackson was just so talented, right? but having Orndorff back at quarterback, he came in, midway through the year last year. They're going to try and pass more this year, and that'll be fun to see, I think, because they got weapons in Whipkey and a couple other guys that they'll be able to pass to you. It'll be fun to see Brian Hansen kind of have his hands in the clay as far as this offense goes. Is that something you're looking forward to, just as a fan, each being able to see, that type of offense implemented for the Pioneers?
Yeah, I really am. Even talking with Coach a little bit, not so much this year. I haven't really got to talk to him since COVID and everything started back in March, but talking to him even previously, he said, this isn't really the offense I intend on having here. Like I said, when you come in and have such a talent as Ben Jackson and Colin Walker in the backfield, you kind of just coach to what they can do, and they can do a lot. Obviously, we saw last year. But you're really going to see a whole new running style, too, from Wes Green. I mean, we've seen a lot of interesting motions Wes Green had last year. Expect a lot more of that this year with a couple new twists in the passing game. Orndorff, and they have Orndorff a quarterback, and they've got a lot of talented receivers. Corey Wise, a tight end. Corey might be a tailback this year. I expect him a tailback, but tight end last year, he's got that in his repertoire. That's a big word for me, Nathan. I see you did it right there. That's a big word for me. But, he's got that experience. And Dalton Lucy, I've heard a lot about Dalton Lucy. He came out late last year. Hopefully he'll stick it out this year. I think he will. Hear a lot about him. They said, Dalton Lucy, he's got great hands. If he can get open field, watch out. He'll put the afterburners on. So I hear a lot of high praise about Dalton Lucy. Of course, Wes Whipkey back, like I mentioned. Maybe Wes will move in that tight end role. I know Wes isn't fast as a wide receiver, but Wes has some good size, so maybe put him at that tight end position, be a nice fit for Wes. But yeah, they got some good talent. It'd be interesting to see how much they throw. I still think West Green's going to be a run first team. Of course, that's our history. Of course, two guys in the top 20 and state rushing all time. That shows right there we're a big time running school. But I think Hansen's going to implement a lot more passing. So I think it's going to be interesting to see this year. I look for Orndorff to have a really big year. I think Orndorff, we could look to him having 1,000-yard passing season. And why are you doing that?
Well, listen. Orndorff came in middle of the year last year, and he maybe threw how many passes before Stowe Rocks?
I know he does have a very talented arm, though. I will.
And the arm that we saw in that Stowe Rocks game was, it was less than impressive.
Yeah, he must not play well in the cold. But what I've seen he's got a very good arm. I'm not saying a Hail Mary. I'm not saying they'll run 4 verticals every play, but would need be. But I know I'm biased. You can say that, but I really think Orndorff will have a big year, and I think he'll be a real big leader for the Pioneers this year.
I think they'll be all right, and definitely not as good as last year. I don't think they're the best team in this conference by far, but there's still a lot of questions there, and I think the chance of them answering their questions is a lot greater than a team like Bentworth or Jefferson Morgan. That's why I think they're in that group of 3 that could threaten for the championship. I think there's a group of I think we agree that there's a group of 3 teams that could win the conference, and there's a group of 5.
Really, this conference is really 3 tiers.
Yeah,
there's the top 3, like we mentioned, that we feel are the favorites as West Green, California, and Carmichael's. And then there's the mid-tier that we think could not win the conference, but still scratch into one of those playoff spots as Jefferson and Bentworth. And there's the teams that need to prove a little more. The 3, there's Monessen, Avella, and Mapletown that are just plain bad or really need to prove themselves this season.
So you mentioned the 3 tiers, right? But is there a team in that top tier that you would be surprised fell out of the top 4? So, like, we went through Carmichael's, California, West Green, Bentworth, Jeff Morgan. So if Bentworth and Jeff Morgan end up cracking, the top 4. Is there a team?
I could who
Is
I think if Bentworth or Jefferson, who I think they could upset.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Carmichael's California West Green, is there a team in there that you'd be surprised to finish 5th? Because I think any one of those teams, well, aside from Carmichael's, I think California West Green could certainly finish 5th, depending on circumstances that happen.
I actually agree with you there. I think I'd be surprised if Carmichael's finishes 5th. Yeah, I'd be surprised there. I could see California and West Green doing that. I don't think it'll happen. More California than West Green, and not because I don't want to sound biased because that's my alma mater, but more California because the line, the issue with their offensive line is what really gets me, and that's what I could see Cal bringing down. I don't think that will happen, but if to answer your question, if there's one team, I could see it being Cal, being the fact that we have so many questions at their offensive line.
All right, and that leads right into our next topic. We're going to set some predictions here. I hope the season happens, but if it does happen, this is what I think is going to happen. I think Carmichael's right now is my favorite. I really like the pieces they bring back. I think the core of their team, aside from Kevin Kelly, is still there. I think they're going to finish first. Second, man, the rest of the conference for me is just, I wouldn't be surprised for anything. Anything could happen right now. I think California right now at second. They just have athletes that other teams in this conference don't have. Then West Green after them, and then Bentworth at 4, Jefferson Morgan at 5, and then Monessen, Avella, at Mapletown to finish off. I think Avella will beat Mapletown both times. That's the difference for me. And then what are your top 8 for this conference here?
Yeah, so you'll like my answer. You think Carmichael's is a true favorite. I truly think the same thing that happened my senior year is going to happen this year. I think there's going to be a 3-way tie for first place in this conference.
Okay.
I really do. Another reason I'm saying this is to save myself because I just think that the teams are so close right now. I really do. I don't. And that's as of right now. I might change my mind later, but as of right now, I really think there's a 3-way tie for first. To be exact, I think Carmichael's beats California. I think California beats West Green, and I think West Green beats Carmichael's. I think I said that right. But I think that's how it goes. I think that's a 3-way tie. I think those 3 teams, if they can answer the questions we just had, if California can answer the offensive line. If Nathan Horndorf can answer the bell and really carry this team, Brian Hansen with a Ben Jackson-less Pioneer squad, and how Carmichael's does without Kevin Kelly. I think that's the big thing. If they can all answer those questions, I really think that there's going to be a 3-way tie. And it might be vice versa there. Carmichael might be West Green might be Cal might be, whatever. What have you, but I think there's a 3-way tie with that. To move on, I think I'm kind of the same way with you the rest of the way, actually. I think it's Bentworth, Jefferson, Monessen, and then Avella. I think Avella beats Mapletown twice, and then and then Mapletown. I think Mapletown's only win this year is against Northgate.
All right, so we're pretty similar that way. I have one more question for you. Obviously, I think Carmichael's and West Green have very talented defensive lines. In California, it has a lot of mystery there. Do you see more of a likelihood of California finishing third in this conference because of that one weakness?
Yeah, I really do. I just said that I could see them out of those top 3 we mentioned going 5th, so I could easily see them going 3rd. They definitely have the athletes, and I'm not disregarding that. They arguably have the best athletes in this conference without a doubt, but that offensive line is the big question, and that offensive line, like I said, it's going to make or break them. It could, have them and being the number 1 team that runs away with it this year, or it could, maybe, like I mentioned, I don't think it'll happen, but maybe be the 5th team in this conference and not even have a shot at the playoffs. So time will tell with California. I think they'll be fine, but I could see them making 3rd. But I'm gonna stick with my three-way tie at first. I think that's really probable this year. Hopefully, might have another coin flip this year, kind of like they did my senior year. That'd be kind of wild. I mean, that never happened before. I mean, that was some like Friday Night Light stuff where they get together at a honky tonk in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and do it. But they do it at Whitfield headquarters in Green Tree, so it's a little more fancy. But I would like to see I'd like to see another coin flip for the trial.
I probably wouldn't like to see that just because it was. I like there to be a clean cut order of teams. I also don't want to. Looking at other 1A teams from the Whippeal, I don't think 3 teams in the playoffs from this is probably the best thing for the Whippeal. But I'd like to see it, more teams to cover. But I don't think that would be probably the greatest thing for the Whippeal to have to decide between 3 of these teams, because I think, I mean, what was that? So a coin is going to keep, so 3 teams with the same record. So 3 teams with the same record, but one of the teams isn't going to make it, is what you're telling me. That coin is going to decide.
They're all 3 conference champions. They'd all 3 make it. That's what happened my senior year. Monessen, California, and West Green all had the same conference record. Each team beat everyone. So the tiebreaker is the Gardner points. The coin flip goes into effect if Gardner points are tied, which Gardner points are goofy.
It's a whole process.
They're right. The Gardner points are better than they used to be. That's why you see teams like how they have it now. If you beat a team by more than 10 points, you only get. So let's say the West Green Bentworth game. West Green beat Bentworth by like 65 points or something.
You only get like 10, right?
You only get 10. You're capped at 10. How it used to be when I was like a freshman, sophomore, junior. That's why teams were running up the score so much. However, you beat a team by, you'd get so like if you beat a team 82-0, you got 82 Gardner points. That's why they did it the way they did, and that was the way it was my senior year. We beat Monessen by, I believe, 18 points, so we only got the 10 Gardner points. Monessen beat California by 10 exactly. They got the 10. California beat us exactly by 10. That's why they got the 10 Gardner points. So then that's how it went to a coin flip. So let's hope each team beats each team by more than 10. And we'll get a coin flip.
Exactly. That just about wraps up this podcast here. It's been fun talking with Jeremiah. Definitely excited to talk with him and preview more teams in the next 2 conferences before the beginning of the season. I'm also excited because the podcast before, so basically the schedule for the rest of the year, the rest before the beginning of the season, we're going to have 2 more conference previews, one for the Interstate, one for the Big 8. Then we're going to have a big old fantasy draft and we're each going to make our teams. So we're going to be picking from all 3 conferences, and we're going to be making our own personal fantasy team. And through the way, we're going to be talking about some of the players that stand out to us, that we're excited for seeing. And then we're going to have our Week 0 preview, hopefully from the confines of Waynesburg University. So that'll definitely be exciting. But yeah, thank you for listening. You can find us just about anywhere podcasts are available. Spotify, Apple Podcast, CastBox, Stitcher, TuneIn, everywhere. You can contact us on Twitter at PA or at JMills44. I'm going to guess. JMills16? 66? There's so many. Okay. And then at Nathan Grella for me. And then, yeah, that's basically how you contact us. Go check out PA Football News for all your Pennsylvania high school football information. Billy does a great job on there. We're definitely excited to write our articles on there for when the season gets started. We're going to be covering 3 to 4 games a week, so that's definitely the place to find all the updates. Other places to find our updates are our Twitter page and our Facebook page, which is where we're going to be posting little tidbits of this podcast, little tidbits of other podcasts, announcements, etc. So definitely go check us out on there. But for now, this has been a long podcast, but this has been the Backyard PA Football Podcast. I'm Nathan Grella,
Jeremiah Miller.
and we will see you guys next week when we're talking about the interstate. See ya.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a reed.